Welcome r/Prorevenge. Neighbor's dogs kill co-worker's cat. Co-worker ruins their Christmas. Years ago, I used to work with a receptionist in a vet clinic named Margaret. Margaret was and still is a very sweet 65-year-old woman who had been at this practice since it was opened some 40 years ago. She always had a smile, a joke, compliments and baked goods for your birthday. She never had an unkind word to say about anyone. She was seriously one of the coolest people I had ever worked with, and she basically knew everyone, from our regular clients to our mailman's granddaughter. The only bad thing about Margaret, and this was not her fault, was that she and her family lived next to one of the trashiest, nastiest families I had ever met that had two even nastier pit bulls. I'm talking nastier than sh*t, that had been hoarded by dung beetles for years. Nasty. And these dogs were constantly escaping and terrorizing the neighborhood, even trying to get into her house. Margaret had asked them more than once to please keep the dogs contained, especially since she had an elderly fat cat named Smokestack and these pits had attacked smaller animals before. The family basically told her to rot in hell, that they knew what they were doing, how dare she accuse the breed, yada yada, basically blowing her off. Margaret knew there had been reports filed against her neighbors but nothing had ever been done about it really. So she made sure to keep Smokestack in the house to keep him safe, and was very careful not to let him out. If you had been paying attention up until this point, you'll notice I'm using the word was and had regarding old Smokestack. And it was as awful as you think. 3 weeks before Christmas, Margaret had the day off and was in the garage with Smokestack fiddling with some Christmas decorations. Unbeknownst to her, the pits next door got out and broke through the bottom of her garage door. They went right for Smokestack before she could blink and started to tear the cat apart. Margaret screamed for help, and it was only when her son and husband came out with a baseball bat that they were able to free Smokestack from the jaws of these dogs. I was working this day and will never forget when she came in, crying harder than I had ever seen anyone cry in my life, clutching poor dying Smokestack in her arms. Her husband had to hold her while we tried to bring Smokestack back, but we couldn't do it. It would have taken a miracle of God and then some, and he passed away, a truly crap way to go in what should have been the golden years of his fat cat life. Margaret sat there for a while with his mangled body, quietly crying for a while, before she finally kissed whatever part of him was still intact and stood up. She told us all, "I've got a job to do, take care of him, girls," and then left. We figured Margaret would take a few days off to be with family and then continue on with life as normal. We figured wrong. Now when I say Margaret knew everyone, I mean everyone. Right after she left the hospital, Margaret gathered herself up and went to the police with pictures of poor Smokestack and told her story. The same police officers she had watched grow up over the last 20 years from rowdy middle schoolers she used to help babysit to the officers they were today. They were absolutely shocked to hear what had happened to their surrogate grandma and pushed her case to the front of the line. The case found itself before a judge whose daughter had gone to school with Margaret's daughter. The judge granted an emergency, dangerous animal extraction warrant to her neighbors. Of course, there was a hearing within 2 weeks, which I gotta admit was ridiculously fast. The neighbors tried to argue that their dogs weren't aggressive. They even went so far as to accuse Margaret of having it out for their family and making it all up. But their argument trickled when the dozens of dangerous animal reports were presented and finally completely dried out when Margaret presented the surveillance video her grandson had gotten showing the dogs coming into her property and attacking poor Smokestack. The emergency extraction and humane destruction of her neighbor's dogs was granted. It was Christmas Eve when Margaret heard a knock on her door. She opened it up to see the neighbors standing there, sobbing uncontrollably. They were begging her to stop animal control, that they had these dogs since they were puppies, how the kids would be devastated and it would ruin Christmas, and if she could find it in her heart to give the dogs another chance. Up until this moment, the neighbors had behaved abominably. They didn't offer to fix the garage. They never apologized for trying to slander her name in court. Hell, they didn't even pay for Smokestack to be cremated. At no point had they even shown the slightest shred of remorse for what damage their dogs had done. and as the neighbors stood there, blubbering and whimpering about how this was going to ruin their Christmas, Margaret looked them straight in the eye and told them, in her calmest voice, "You took away my family, so now I'm taking yours," and shut the door in their face, just as animal control pulled up onto the driveway. Margaret was not surprised as she watched the dogs get hauled into the truck and taken away. After all, it was her idea for animal control to take the dogs on Christmas Eve, a perk from having known the ACOF as a supervisor for years. Margaret even made sure the dogs were euthanized before the outside Christmas lights turned on that night. The family never received the remains, nor did they ever get a chance to bring another animal into their family, as the father proceeded to drunk drive into a telephone pole that same night, killing him instantly. Mom went off the deep end, so CPS picked up the kids by February, and ultimately, the house foreclosed in September. Despite how traumatic Smokestak's death was, I'd like to think that, if the neighbors had shown at least some regret, Margaret might not have gone as far as she did. She was / is still the person to forgive and forget. Or maybe, she ultimately knew it had to be done, to push it to this point of no return before another family lost a member to these irresponsible neighbors. Either way, thank you Margaret for making the world a little bit safer for the pets in the world. And rest in peace, Smokestak. Hopefully I'll see you on the other side with your favorite orange sock and a can of tuna. While my mother-in-law's dog was nowhere as bad as these dogs, however he was aggressive. They had him for years and treated him as a prince, never hit him, never yelled him and trained him, but there was evil in him. He bit my stepson in the face before I met my wife and they refused to put him down. When we had kids, I refused to let her bring any of the kids there. Christmas Eve a few years later, we went to her house. I watched that dog like a hawk. At no time were the kids remotely aggressive towards the dog. Finally, after a few hours, the dog got up and slowly made his way towards my daughter. She was 4 at the time and the type that wouldn't even think to step on an ant. I went to block him, and he suddenly lunged and snapped inches from my daughter's face. I picked him up and threw his ass outside and stated if they didn't put him down, I was going to do it. Needless to say, they put him down, and she has hated my guts since. Long story, but some dogs, even when treated well, are still evil. A lady comes through my work at least once every day. She has 2 puppies, a big male and a little baby, who's only maybe 8 weeks, that she brought with her one day. Her big boy is the absolute sweetest thing. He sits in her passenger seat, licks at her face and her cups, and his tail wags a mile a minute whenever he sees his treat. He's so relaxed and sweet, and the little girl is too. You can tell she loves them. And that is the difference here. These people don't love the dogs. They like being able to say they had dogs. And those poor babies were taught to be violent and hateful when they could have been just like her dogs if raised right. Pitties are my favorite breed. It makes me so sad when they are mistreated like this. I'm a cat person, but dogs are so blessed. I need to keep reminding myself I did the right thing when reporting a dangerous dog. I have a horse, and where I keep him, the house next door is abandoned and occupied by squatters. They don't bother us, and we keep our peace. But one day I was riding my horse out of the paddock, and I heard barking coming from the house. Next thing, a giant pit bull came out and was chasing us. My horse bolted, and luckily no cars were on the street or we may have been in serious trouble. The dog chased us across the street and into the park for a few minutes. After I knew I was safe, I had the biggest panic attack of my life. I called my paddock mate and she called the council on my behalf. Within a few hours I got a call from the council to give my statement. Then I got a call the next day to say they have picked up the dog. I feel so guilty because I know that dog was put down, but it was living with drug addicts and had no fencing to keep it secure. Across from a park where people walk with their children and dogs. I know I did the right thing for my horse's safety, but man, that dog didn't choose to live in a fucking crack den. I know I was attacked by 3 dogs and only one bit me. I wasn't even going to report it, but my doctor actually made me when he stitched me up because he said it could happen to a kid on our street and that made me feel terrible. So I did. I went to the police station and then went to animal control and they made these people surrender their dog. but they didn't surrender the one that bit me. They just surrendered one that they did not want, which was actually not one of the ones that was aggressive. When animal control called me to identify the dog, I went up there, and as soon as I saw it, I said that's not the right one, and I just burst into tears. People are so heartless. I actually know the who did this, and I can't wait to run into her in person one of these days and tell her exactly what I think. I'm a veterinarian who has had to euthanize dogs that have been inappropriately housed and cared for, left to roam, or kept on insecure premises, and have subsequently attacked another animal or a human. Some of those dogs were perfectly friendly under the right circumstances, but the owners failed to heed the advice of myself and others in regards to specific triggers for their aggression. You can never trust them to be well behaved at all times, no matter what. How well any dog behaves is always 100% the responsibility of the owner. Even my overtly placid golden retriever is housed securely, handled appropriately at the dog park, and never trusted alone around unfamiliar animals. My Great Dane I know for sure would kill any cat she could get her jaws on, and as a result she is secured in a full enclosed patio when I'm not at home that she cannot escape, and cats cannot get into either. I've had the owners of these dogs crying, begging me not to go ahead. I always make it crystal clear to them that they're right. It's not the dog's fault. It's yours. You made this happen through your carelessness, and this is the painful price everyone pays as a result of it. The dog, the owners, and I, who can see this dog under the right care, would be fine, but because of the local laws I have to destroy your dog once it actively attacks or kills outside of your property. It angers me immensely to have to do it. Our family used to spend a week each summer at a cottage ground on the North Shore. Each summer the same people would come, and we knew each other and all the various dogs that each family brought with them. One summer, a new family came with a German Shepherd / pit mix. This thing was vicious. We had a small Sheltie and the pit tried to attack her while I was holding her in my arms. It was terrifying. I don't know who cried harder, me or my dog. We went to the cottage owners about it, but the dog family managed to get it brushed off as a one-time thing, until their pit attacked our dog while she was tied up. When we went to town, my uncle had to beat the damn thing with a piece of firewood to get it to back down. Blessedly uncle reacted fast enough that our good girl wasn't hurt beyond some scratches and drool, but the family was immediately told to leave with no refund and a lifetime ban on them and their dog.